Hello, today I'm going to talk to you about the exclusive right of sale listing agreement working as a transaction broker. You can find this form on Form Simplicity, which is what I'm using now, or Transaction Dex, Loop, whatever website you use to access your forms. And usually it's the one that is free through your local realtor board organization. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and list the seller. And then for the broker, you're going to put Star Bay Realty Corp. And you'll put in the time frame for which this listing agreement is to continue. So let's say the seller says, okay, I'll give you to start today for the listing agreement, and I'll give you till the end of the year to find me a buyer. After that, you'll go ahead and enter the legal address of the property. And also you want to enter in the legal description. If you're not sure what the legal description of the property is, you can just go on to your local county property appraiser website, type in the name of the owner or the address, and somewhere on here you'll be able to see a portion that's called legal description. So you could just copy and paste that on here. If it's a really long legal description, you could just click see attachment and just put it on a separate form and attach it to here. Next, you want to include any personal property that will convey with the property. This includes washer, dryer, dishwasher, etc. And this is a good time to talk to your seller just to make sure there is something that may be valuable or meaningful to them that they do not want to convey with the property. And I would be sure to mention that on the MLS as well. If the property is occupied by a tenant, go ahead and check up here in the lease term. Next, you'll go ahead and enter the price and the financing terms that the seller is willing to accept. Obviously, the more financing terms you accept, the more likely you'll get a good buyer. If the seller is willing to do seller financing, you would go ahead and check up here and enter the terms. If they're going to allow an assumption of their existing mortgage, you will go ahead and check up here and enter the terms such as the mortgage amount and the fees and the interest rates. Just be careful with the assumption of existing mortgage as well as sometimes seller financing too, because with assumption of existing mortgage, sometimes the seller may still be liable if there's any defaults with the new buyer. And so I always advise to seek legal counsel or a mortgage expert before you decide on if that's a good idea for you. If the seller wants to cover any of the buyer's expenses, you can go ahead and put that percentage here. Usually you can just try to negotiate that when you receive an offer. Obviously you're going to do your best effort to sell the property, and then you're going to go ahead and place the property on the MLS. This is allowing and informing your seller about all of that. If for some reason the seller says, I don't want to put it on the MLS right now, I need like a day or two to get my house in order, I would go to the bottom of this form and put that in the additional comments that seller does not want this to be placed on the MLS till whatever date, just so that you're clear that's the reason why you didn't put it on the MLS right away. And another thing is, if the seller does sign this, but then tomorrow you get a call and he says, no, I changed my mind, I don't want to put it on the MLS right now, I would go ahead and write a listing addendum to this, just so you have it on paper. So this form gives you authority to advertise, and you will go ahead and select here that if the seller for some reason has some kind of exceptions on how you advertise it, you would go ahead and mark it on here. For example, he wants you to display the property but don't put the street address. Sometimes this is more common with commercial properties than residential, but you would go ahead and check it up here. And if he doesn't want you to put it on the internet at all, you would check up here and make sure he initials here, because if this property is not listed on the internet, nobody will be able to search for it, and just make sure your seller is aware of that. You can also put any signs on the property, such as for sale, pending, closed, sold. Just make sure you're being compliant with any HOA regulations if there are any, or condo regulations. Make sure you obtain any information relating to the present mortgage. Also, you will be able to put a lockbox on here, preferably the Supra, which ensures that only local realtors are having access to the property. even though you are putting the lockbox on there, you're not liable for any damage or theft. So advise your sellers to keep away all valuables. Once again, you're working as a transaction broker. So some brokerages have these virtual office websites where they will put in estimations of the properties or some comments about those properties. So usually your seller can just say, no, I don't want to have any of that. And there'll be a spot on the MLS where you can notate that. And then it will list all your obligations. Obviously, the seller should inform you of any material known defects, violations that are on the property. They should do this by filling out the seller disclosure form, and make sure you upload that to the MLS and provide it to any potential buyers. If anything changes after this listing agreement is made, they should update you and create a new seller disclosure if so warranted. Then you guys will agree on compensation. You can list it as a total percentage of the purchase price or a dollar amount. So example, you could put 6% here, or you could put like, 12,000 here, whatever you guys agree upon. Let's just say that we put 6%. After that, basically here there's just more information about the broker's fees. For example, if the seller defaults in any way, then you will be entitled to a fee, which you can put that amount on here, a percentage. And if the property is sold, you can put like if it's sold within or if it goes under contract within 5 or 10 days after the termination date, and it's a buyer that you actually procured or who visited the property while you were under this listing agreement, then you could still be entitled for compensation for that. So you can put all that information here. Or if the buyer defaults and a deposit is collected from the buyer, then you could be you could also get part of that deposit. You could put that amount on here. Next, you will put in the amount that you're going to share with a buyer's broker if the buyer has a broker. And for example, if you're going to split, like in the previous, we put 6%. So if you're going to split that, you would just put 3% here. And just make sure that you, when you go on the MLS, you put it in all these areas, because if there is no compensation to the buyer's broker, then it cannot be placed on the MLS. Brokerage relationship, once again, you'll be acting as a transaction broker. Those are the details of a transaction broker. I'm sure you guys already know. If there is a conditional termination at the seller's request, then the broker may agree to conditionally terminate this agreement. If that happens, then the seller must sign a withdrawal agreement, reimburse the broker for all direct expenses incurred in the marketing of the property, and pay a cancellation fee of a set amount, which you list here, plus applicable sales tax. However, the broker may void that conditional termination, and the seller will just pay a fee, which is your commission stated in paragraph 8A, minus the cancellation fee, if the seller transfers or contracts to transfer the property or any interest in the property during the time period from the date of the conditional termination to the actual termination date and protection period if applicable. So if he transfers his property he sells his property essentially, or then you would void that conditional termination and you would be applicable to get your fees that were listed in 8A. Dispute resolution. If for some reason there's any type of dispute, it lists all the terms here of how you would go about resolving that dispute. Once again, this agreement is binding on the seller and the broker's heirs. This agreement is the entire agreement between the seller and the broker. No prior or present agreements or representations will be binding on the seller or broker unless included in this agreement. Electronic signatures are acceptable and will be binding. Signatures, initials, and modifications communicated by fax will be considered as originals. The term buyer used in this agreement includes buyers, tenants, exchangers, optionees, and other categories of potential or actual transferees. And then if there's any other additional terms, you can go ahead and put that on here. You can go ahead and have the seller sign here and enter your information here. And go ahead and upload this to the portal once you're done. And that's it.